Hi, I'm Renee Tucci, and I'm about to share with you some care and handling tips for your fresh flowers. Before you get started processing your flowers, you want to make sure you have a few tools and materials nearby to help you move through your processing faster. And some of those tools I recommend would be a floral knife, a pair of scissors, and a pair of bunch cutters or your preferred clippers that will help you get through several stems at a time. And that's simply to move things along and make processing more productive. If you know you're going to be processing roses, I recommend having some type of stripper nearby. This is just a rubber stripper, and I'll show you how to use this in a bit. And this is a claw style. Of course, there are some other materials you'll want to have on hand as well to help keep your flowers alive longer. And we'll start with the DCD. This is a disinfectant, cleaner, and deodorizer. And of course, I have it in an industrial size, but this is used to clean everything. Clean your tools, clean your buckets, clean your workspaces. If it's left, if a little bit of residue of this is left behind on any of your surfaces, it won't hurt the flowers at all. And clean surfaces, buckets, and tools are what's going to help our stems stay clean. And of course, then that will help them stay alive longer. So I definitely recommend adding DCD into your arsenal. And then of course, we'll need flower food. When you're getting ready to process, you'll want to have all of your buckets or your vessels filled with clean, room temperature or cold water ready to go so that when you cut your stems, you can put it right in the water. And that water should be pre-treated with flower food. It's very, very, very important that you follow the manufacturer's recommendations for how you measure that flower food. Of course, regular consumers may be familiar with these little packets and the instructions on the back, and it definitely tells you how much packet goes with how much water, so you need to pay attention to that. For those of us that use a lot, you can also get it in industrial sizes as well. This is one version. They have flower food in powder and liquid form all the way up into the big gallon tanks for those that use even more. So having the flower food pre-mixed into your buckets of water is going to be vital to keep things moving for you. You'll also want to have on hand this material called Quick Dip, and this will help with water absorption of your stems, especially your thirsty stems. So if you're working with things like hydrangea, viburnum, astilbe, things that wilt pretty easily, I recommend cutting them, dipping them in some Quick Dip for 2 or 3 seconds, and then putting them in your flower food treated water. This product helps clean the stems of the flowers, and it helps the flowers absorb the water faster, which of course is going to help our flowers live longer. And then once your flowers are designed and ready to go out the door, you'll want to treat them with a finishing spray. And I have 2 options to share with you here today. We have a finishing touch, and this is for flowers that are designed in water, so a vase arrangement or an arrangement in floral foam, something that has the benefit of a water source as it's going to its second life. This helps promote opening of the flowers, it helps color development, and it just helps with hydration. It helps sort of seal in the moisture to the petals so that they don't evaporate through the petals as much. This is called Crowning Glory, and I recommend using this, or I should say the manufacturer recommends using this on pieces or flowers that do not have the benefit of a water source after they have been designed. So things such as a boutonniere, a corsage, a flower head wreath, anything that is not left with a water source for its showtime should be treated with a Crowning Glory. It helps, again, lock in the moistures in a little bit more significant way on the petals so that it doesn't transpire the moisture through the petals, helping them stay crispy and showy for as long as possible. So those are some of the materials and tools I recommend having on hand before you get started with your processing. Okay, so now that we have all of our materials nearby, our buckets are ready to go with pre-measured flower food, we're ready to start processing. Just out of shot of the camera at my feet, I've got a compost bucket, so all of my green waste will go into there, and then I've got a trash bin for the plastic wraps and rubber bands. So I'm just going to show you a few different types of flowers and how you might process them. We'll start with this foliage. This is called Aspidistra. It generally comes in a 10-stem bunch, and of course you would cut that rubber band free and simply trim the stems into your waste bucket. So anytime you're trimming, you want to trim on a nice clean 45-degree angle. That's going to make sure that the water can absorb up the stem as easily as possible. This particular foliage, and most foliages I should say, are very simple to process because that's it, we're done. So that one's already ready to go. It starts to get a little more complicated once you start working your way into flowers that have foliage on the stems, and I'll show you what I mean. Here we have a bunch of spray roses. Again, these generally come in bunches of 10 stems, and they have some leaves or some foliage on their stems. We want to remove all of that. And so for productivity's sake, I generally, on spray roses, work through an entire bunch at a time. You could, of course, pull out one stem and remove its leaves and then do the next. But I am used to trying to get this part done as fast as possible so that I can move right into my designing. So I try to be as productive as possible. So once you've got most of the leaves removed, anything that might accidentally fall into the water line, that's what you want removed. So you need a clean strip of stem here to go into the water. Again, a nice sharp cut on a 45-degree angle with a good pair of clean snippers, and into the bucket it goes. Moving on to carnations. These generally come in bunches of 25 stems, and they often come very tight and closed. And there is another video in this series that I will share a link to that shows you how to manually open a carnation so that they can be bigger and showier for you. But to process a carnation, some folks just trim them and drop them in water, and you can do that. But the carnation does have a leaf. It's an unusual looking leaf. It's a very thin, strappy, long leaf. And these, if you do not remove them, they tangle in the bucket, and then when you try to kind of free one, they snap very easily at their knuckles, which are the joints that come running up the stems, and therefore you could cause your carnation to snap and be shorter than you need it to be, and then it's really hard to use. So I generally will pick up a third of a bunch or a half a bunch and just go in and start removing these lower leaves. Again, you don't really have to worry about the top third, but the bottom 2/3 should be cleared of as many of these leaves as possible. And they come off very easily, but again, you want to make sure you're pulling horizontal, straight, not on an angle, because that will cause the carnation to snap at those joints. Okay, now we're moving on to Freesia. And Freesia generally come in 10-stem bunches. And it's such a lovely flower. I wish you had smell-o-vision because it really smells delicious. But Freesia comes with a lot of what we call laterals, or branches off the side of the main stem. And I personally prefer to remove these because of the same reason I mentioned with the carnations. If you leave all of these together like this in their vase or bucket or however you're storing them, they very easily get tangled within each other, and it's hard to pull just one out if that's all you need to design with. So I prefer to carefully pluck these side shoots off, just like that, and have my beautiful showstopper stem ready to go. Now, of course, you could easily keep these side shoot stems in their own little vase and add them into designs and creations for textural elements and line and to create rhythm and all of those good things. But, however, they will not open. So these little buds, they will not open. They will, however, add texture and all those things I just mentioned. So they can definitely be used, but for storage, I highly recommend creating clean Freesia stems in your storage vessel. Now, believe it or not, Freesia actually does best without a fresh cut. This is the only flower that I have heard of that it works best for. This is the only flower that I ever do this with. But I actually fight the urge to give it a fresh cut, and I just, after I've cleaned the stems, put it directly in my flower food water. And they actually develop and open a little bit better. So I'm not sure the science behind it. I'm certain that there is science behind it, but perhaps I will look into that and post another video about that later, so stay tuned. Okay, now we've got a bunch of Astrumeria here. This is a very common flower used in a lot of different designs and creations throughout the industry. Astrumeria are available in almost every color under the sun. It's just a great workhorse for us for the industry. But it is a type of flower that comes very closed and needs to have some time to develop and open. And to do that, I like to take away all the competition for any water that the blooms might benefit from. So as you can see, the stems come with a lot of foliage. So I like to remove all of that foliage, and I even go straight up into the flower head area itself, right where the flower stems, the floret stems meet the main stem. I remove those leaves as well. Not only does that, again, take away any competition for water, but these leaves tend to bruise easily and fade quickly, and they just don't add a lot to the flower. So let's just go ahead and remove them now. So again, for productivity, I generally do multiple stems at one time, and it's really easy to process Astrumeria. They come off really quickly, so I'll do all of this at once, and then I'll just quickly go through each stem and pluck away all these top leaves. While you're doing this, keep an eye out for any bruised or damaged flower heads. You'll want to remove those right away as well. Again, they're going to compete for water uptake, and if they're not pretty now, they're not going to get prettier. So you want to make sure that you're removing them and just freeing up that time that you don't have to do it later. Let's see if I can find an example here. Oh, here's a good example. So this floret has broken right underneath the head and is hanging down. So I'm just going to go ahead with my clippers and remove that floret, and you'll never miss it. Okay, now we're up to some chrysanthemums. I have two different types here. I have the pom-pom variety, which has multiple blooms on each stem, and I have a larger single head variety. Now with the chrysanthemums, again, you want to remove any of the lower leaves, especially anything that's damaged or broken that can easily fall into the water line and degrade in the water, causing bacteria and buildup of things that we do not want in the water, and then the rest of the blooms drink that water and perish sooner than we'd like. So again, always clean stems going into our water. And particularly with pom-poms, you want to look through and make sure that you don't have any, for example, here's a great example. This particular stem has a few of the heads that have broken off. It just happens they're a very, they can be brittle if you don't handle them correctly. So I just go ahead at this point and clip them off, those headless stems. I clip those off so that it's one less thing I have to do later. And again, I don't have any extra side laterals to catch my main stems with, so that when I go to actually use them or select the stems that I want, everything comes free and even. Okay, and now we have a bunch of lilies here. This particular lily is a hybrid, so it's a little hardier and easier to work with. It doesn't damage as easily as some of the other varieties. And of course, we're going to remove all of the leaves that are on the stems, but there's one extra step we need to take with our lilies. For any of the lilies that we can actually see inside of, because obviously we see many blooms have not developed yet, and they will, we just need to give them a little time. But for those that we can see into, we can see that the anthers are exposed. And so given enough time, right now, they are very easy to handle and they don't leave any pollen marks. But given time, this will puff up and become a fluffy brown stain maker. And not only will it stain the petals, but it will stain anything it touches, including your clothing, interior of your car or delivery vehicle, linens for your recipients, anything like that. So whenever I can see into a lily, I do my best to just go ahead and pluck out all of those anthers so that I have a nice clean lily inside and I don't have to worry about the staining. A quick note about lilies and flowers in general that need time to open. I mentioned earlier that I recommended clean, cold water or room temperature water. My only exception to that is for something like lilies or gladiola or even carnations or Astrumeria that come in very, very tight and you need them to open pretty quickly. There are a lot of scenarios where that does happen. So then I might increase the temperature of my water when I initially process it. So then it becomes pretty warm to the touch. We definitely don't want it to be too hot. But if we cut them and put them in warm water, they will develop faster. Once that warm water has settled down to room temperature again, give the flowers a few hours to sit in that. I would take them out, give them another fresh cut, and get them in cooler, clean water all over again, just to kind of reset that process. But it does give the flowers a chance to open and develop a little faster than they would if they were just in room temperature water. Okay, now it's time to process our roses. If you get them like this straight from a grower or a market or even a florist, this is called a grower pack, and they come delivered from the grower in packs of 25, just like the carnations. They'll have that plastic overwrap and then this cardboard inner wrap, and that helps keep them all snug in their spots. So once you open the roses, you'll want to spread them out quickly, and I should note, for all of your flowers, as soon as you get them, you want to process them right away, especially if they're in boxes or something like that where ethylene is starting to build up, because flowers do give off ethylene, and that is a flower killer. So you want to make sure you open those boxes, take them out, get them in the room so that they can really breathe and not be trapped with that ethylene. So we'll want to open these, remove any interior pieces that may have been keeping everything tight and separating it, and then you'll just start to strip the foliage away. Now, I mentioned when I went through the tools that I had two tools that I like to use for stripping roses. The rubber hand, or the rubber flower, is very simple. You simply fold it around the stem and pull, and that removes the foliage and takes the edge off of the thorns, so that even though the thorns are still there, they don't hurt anymore. My preference, though, is to use the claw version, and same technique where you take the claw and close it around the rose right where you want to start, and then simply pull. Sometimes you have to back up and reverse and go down again a few times, but it does a great job. This completely removes all the foliage and the thorns, so you don't have to worry about yourself, your designers, your customers getting cut by the thorns. If you don't happen to have a stripper or rose tool anywhere near you, that's fine. Another method would actually be using a floral knife, and you can go down the stem and quickly remove the leaves and the thorns with your knife. It's very easily done, just slightly more time consuming than if you were using the rose stripper. Okay, I hope you've learned some tips for processing, care, and handling. Just a quick recap: you want to make sure you have all your tools handy, your additives and nutrients for your flowers that go in the water, and that you've got a trash bin and a compost bin nearby. Just set yourself up for success and processing will go very quickly. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.